Have you ever felt like you're adrift in the currents of life, searching for something greater, something more meaningful than the routine you've grown accustomed to? Perhaps, in your solitude, you've gazed at the sky, longing for a sign, a glimmer of hope, that the challenges you're facing will soon be overshadowed by divine intervention. But what if I told you that the signs you seek are already within your reach, woven into the very fabric of your daily existence, just waiting for your eyes to open and your heart to believe? As it is written, "The Lord is near to all who call on him, to all who call on him in truth." Psalm 145, verse 18. These divine whispers are not distant or hidden. They are closer than you realize, ready to usher in a season of unexpected blessings and transformation. In every moment of despair, in every shadow that seems to eclipse your joy, know that God's love is your guiding light, illuminating a path toward a future filled with grace and renewal. Trust in his promises, for he who calls you is faithful, who also will do it. 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 24. Embrace the signs and step into the miraculous that awaits. Type 7777 to affirm your commitment, or Amen, if you agree with this message of divine hope. In our journey through life, there are times when we are tested beyond measure, our strength and faith both challenged by the storms that seem to rage against us. It is precisely in these moments of turmoil and uncertainty, when the world feels as though it is closing in, that the Lord extends his hand to us. His signs, though powerful, are often gentle, easily overlooked if we are not vigilant in recognizing them. One of these signs is a peace that defies all understanding. Can you recall a time when everything around you was falling apart, when the noise of doubt, fear, and anxiety was deafening, and yet, within you, there was an inexplicable calm? It is in these moments that God, in his infinite grace, wraps us in a peace that is not of this world. It is the peace that Jesus himself embodied during his time on earth, a peace that said, "I am with you always, even to the end of the age." Matthew 28, verse 20. This peace does not erase our struggles, nor does it immediately change our circumstances, but it reminds us that God is sovereign, working all things together for our good. Romans 8, verse 28. And that his plan is far greater than any trial we face. In Scripture, we are reminded that the peace of God surpasses all understanding. Philippians 4, verse 7. This peace is not about the absence of trouble, but the assurance of God's presence in the midst of it. Just as Jesus calmed the storm with a simple command, he also offers us this same peace, not by the elimination of our troubles, but through the calm assurance that he is in control. When Jesus was on the cross, he did not react to his tormentors with fear or hatred. Instead, he trusted in the Father's plan, offering peace to those around him even in his final moments. His peace was not dependent on his circumstances, but rooted in the unwavering knowledge that God's will was being fulfilled. How can we, then, do any less in our own struggles? How often do we try to fight our battles alone, instead of surrendering to God's will, trusting that he will lead us through the storm? This is the peace that God offers us, a peace that allows us to stand firm in the face of giants, knowing that he fights on our behalf. Consider the story of David and Goliath, a powerful example of faith and peace in action. David, a young shepherd, faced a giant that everyone else feared. By all human logic, he should have been defeated. But David, armed with nothing but a slingshot and a heart full of faith, approached Goliath with a peace that the world could not understand. "You come against me with sword and spear, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty." 1 Samuel 17, verse 45. David knew that his strength was not his own, but was drawn from the peace of God that filled his heart. His faith in God's presence and power allowed him to walk fearlessly into battle, knowing that victory was not in his hands, but in the hands of the Almighty. This is the peace that transcends all understanding, a peace that allows us to face the impossible with the certainty that God is with us, guiding every step. But how do we recognize this peace when it arrives in our own lives? It is often in the quiet moments, during prayer, when reading the Word, or even in the midst of chaos, that we feel God's peace settle over us. It may come as a sudden calmness, a whisper in our hearts that says, "I am here." It is not a feeling we can manufacture, but a divine gift from God, a reminder that He is always near. Have you experienced this peace in your life? Have you felt it wash over you in your darkest moments, when all hope seemed lost? If you have, then you have felt the unmistakable presence of the Lord Himself, assuring you that He is with you. And in those moments, hold on to that peace. It is a sign that God is preparing something incredible for you. Just as He prepared David for victory, He is preparing you for the blessings He has in store. This peace is not just a comfort. It is a sign that something greater is coming. It is a foretaste of the divine surprises God has waiting for you. Life has a way of surprising us, often when we least expect it. Perhaps it will come in the form of sudden opportunities, doors that open at just the right time, leading us into unknown paths that we never could have imagined. Like a forest clearing, these opportunities may appear daunting at first, uncertain and unfamiliar. But these are not mere coincidences. These are God's divine interventions, placed carefully in our lives to lead us toward our true purpose. It is in these moments of unexpected clarity that we must pause and ask ourselves, are we willing to step into the unknown, trusting that God will guide our steps? Are we brave enough to walk the path He has prepared for us, even when we cannot see the end? The sudden opportunities God places before us are not random. They are the manifestations of His divine will, preparing us for the future He has already designed. God's signs are not always loud or dramatic. Often, they come in quiet whispers, in subtle moments of peace and unexpected opportunities. But they are no less powerful. They are invitations to trust in Him more fully, to embrace His plan even when it is unclear, and to walk in faith, knowing that He will never leave us nor forsake us. Hebrews 13 verse 5. So, when you encounter peace beyond understanding, when you find doors opening before you in the most unlikely places, remember that these are signs from God, signs that He is at work, preparing you for something far greater than you can imagine. Trust in Him and step forward with confidence, for He is always with you, guiding you toward His divine purpose for your life. Join us as we move to the next sign, where we'll explore how an increased desire for prayer and worship signifies that God's surprises are just around the corner. In the tapestry of our spiritual journey, there are moments when the threads of prayer and worship become more vibrant, more pronounced. It's in these moments that we find our third sign. The desire for prayer and worship increases. This isn't about routine or obligation. It's a deep, heartfelt pull towards spending more time in God's presence, seeking His face with renewed passion and intensity. Imagine a plant turning towards the sun, soaking in the rays with an innate need to grow and thrive. Similarly, our souls, at certain junctures, instinctively turn towards God, craving the nourishment that only His presence can provide. This increased desire for prayer and worship is a divine signal, a whisper from God inviting us to draw closer, to prepare our hearts for the wonders He's about to perform in our lives. Consider the life of Daniel, a man known for his unwavering faith and devotion to God. Despite the decree that prayer to anyone other than the king would result in being thrown into the lion's den, Daniel's desire for prayer and worship did not wane. It intensified. His commitment to God, even in the face of potential death, was a testament to his trust in God's power and provision. And how did God respond? With a miraculous delivery, safeguarding Daniel amidst the lions, and surprising not just Daniel, but an entire kingdom with His might. So, what does this increased desire for prayer and worship look like in your life? It might be waking up with a song of praise on your lips, feeling an urge to read the Bible more, or finding yourself praying throughout the day, conversing with God about everything and anything. It's a sign that God is drawing you closer, preparing you for a new chapter filled with His glory and grace. This heightened spiritual longing is not by chance, it's by design. It's God's way of equipping you, strengthening your faith, and ensuring you're ready for the blessings and challenges ahead. It's a reminder that in every season, our greatest strength lies in our relationship with Him. When you feel this pull towards deeper prayer and worship, let it transform you. Let it guide you, and most importantly, let it reassure you that God is about to surprise you in ways you've never imagined. Take, for example, the story of Esther in the Bible. An ordinary young woman living an ordinary life was suddenly given the opportunity to become queen. This was no ordinary opportunity. It was a divine setup for Esther to save her people from destruction. Through this sudden opening, Esther found herself in a position to make a significant impact, a role she could never have envisioned for herself. Her courage and faith turned what seemed like a chance opportunity into a pivotal moment in history. So, how do you recognize these sudden opportunities as signs from God? First, they often come when you least expect them, breaking into your routine with a promise of something new. Second, they align with the desires God has placed in your heart, even if the connection isn't immediately clear. And finally, they come with a sense of peace, the same unexplained peace we talked about earlier, assuring you that God is indeed leading the way. When you encounter a sudden opportunity, take a moment to pray and seek God's guidance. These moments are not just about the opportunities themselves, but about trusting God to lead you into His best for your life. They are reminders that God is actively working in your life, opening doors that no one can shut and preparing you for a future filled with His blessings. Remember, when a door suddenly opens and you're faced with an opportunity that seems both exciting and terrifying, it might just be God surprising you with a chance to step into a greater destiny. Embrace it with faith and let God's plan unfold. Stay tuned as we explore the next sign revealing how the alignment of circumstances can signal that God's surprises are just around the corner. Have you ever looked back on a series of events in your life and marveled at how perfectly they aligned to lead you to where you are today? This intricate weaving of life's tapestry, is our fourth sign, alignment of circumstances. It's like watching a puzzle come together piece by piece, where every part fits just right, revealing a beautiful picture that was impossible to see at the start. Imagine you're navigating through a dense forest, each turn seemingly random, each path chosen with a mix of intuition, and suddenly, you find that every effort and time has led you to a place you never expected. This is the essence of divine alignment, when circumstances, decisions, and even the delays and detours in our lives converge in a way that propels us forward, closer to our destiny, closer to God's extraordinary plans for us. The life of Joseph is a profound testament to God's perfect orchestration of circumstances, demonstrating how even the darkest trials can be transformed into instruments of divine purpose. Joseph, sold into slavery by his own brothers, falsely accused, and cast into prison, faced what seemed like an endless series of setbacks. Yet, through it all, God's guiding hand was unmistakably present. Every hardship Joseph endured was not in vain. Each moment was a divine step towards his elevation to power in Egypt, where he would ultimately save not only his family but an entire nation from famine. This incredible story reflects the theological truth that God works all things for good, even in the midst of our most difficult circumstances. In the quiet moments of our lives, we often struggle to see God's plan unfolding, just as Joseph may have wondered about the meaning of his suffering. But when we look back, we can recognize how each trial, each seeming failure, was an essential part of the puzzle that led to God's redemptive purpose. This alignment of circumstances in Joseph's life offers a mirror for our own journeys. As we walk through life, it's easy to feel lost, to question why doors remain closed, or why certain events unfold the way they do. But just as God had a perfect purpose for Joseph's life, He has one for ours as well. Do you ever feel like life's trials are too much to bear? Do you find yourself wondering where God is in the midst of your pain? The answer lies in faith, trusting that God's divine hand is at work, even when we cannot see it. God often works in ways that challenge our understanding, but these are the moments when our trust in Him is tested and refined. Joseph's life teaches us that when we cannot see the way ahead, we can trust that He is already there, arranging every detail for our good and His glory. In our own lives, how do we begin to recognize the divine alignment of events and people? How do we discern when something is not just a coincidence but the hand of God guiding us? Often, it is through the seemingly insignificant moments that God's presence becomes most evident. Consider the opportunities that present themselves just when you need them, or the people who come into your life at exactly the right moment. These aren't random occurrences, but divine interventions. When you find yourself in a situation where everything seems to fall into place, do you take a moment to thank God for His perfect timing? It is in these moments that we must pause and reflect, for they are reminders that God is actively shaping our journey, even when we do not fully understand how. As we reflect on God's perfect timing and divine guidance, it becomes essential to pay attention to the recurring themes in our lives. Are there certain patterns or messages that seem to appear time and again? In the rhythm of our lives, certain notes continue to resurface, drawing our attention to a particular truth or direction that God wants us to understand. These recurring themes are not mere happenstance. They are the echoes of God's voice, guiding us towards His will. Do you ever wonder why certain challenges, people, or ideas seem to come back into your life over and over again? Could it be that God is trying to tell you something significant? Just as a piece of music repeats its themes to build meaning and clarity, God uses recurring themes in our lives to deepen our understanding and guide us along his path. Take the life of Moses, for instance. His story is marked by the theme of leadership and deliverance, first in his adoption into Pharaoh's house and later in his call to lead the Israelites out of bondage. Despite his initial hesitations and feelings of inadequacy, Moses could not escape the recurring theme of divine calling on his life. Time and again, God revealed his purpose for Moses until he was finally able to accept the role he had been chosen for. How often do we resist God's call because we feel inadequate or unworthy? But God, in his infinite wisdom and love, equips those he calls. He does not simply leave us to navigate our journey on our own, but gives us the strength, wisdom, and courage to follow his will. So, how can we recognize and interpret these recurring themes in our own lives? Start by listening closely to the messages that continue to appear. Reflect on conversations, scriptures, or opportunities that seem to point you in a particular direction. Are there lessons or insights that keep resurfacing in different forms? Take time to pray and ask God for the wisdom to understand the deeper meaning of these recurring themes. As you seek his guidance, be open to how he might be directing you toward a greater purpose. Perhaps he is calling you to act in faith, to take a step in obedience, or to surrender a part of your life that has been holding you back. Trust that God's plan is unfolding, even when it seems unclear, and have faith that, like Joseph and Moses, your journey is part of a greater, divine purpose. In moments when it feels like everything is falling into place, when the puzzle pieces of your life begin to form a clear picture, remember that God is the master craftsman. He is the one orchestrating every detail, weaving your story into his grand narrative. As we reflect on the lives of Joseph, Moses, and countless others who have walked in faith, let us remember that our story, too, is part of God's masterpiece. Trust in his plan, embrace the recurring themes, and know that his surprises, his blessings, and divine interventions are closer than you think. Will you follow his lead, even when the path seems uncertain? Will you trust that he is guiding you to a place of wonder and joy beyond what you could ever imagine? In our journey through life, God's grace continually works through recurring signs, leading us along a path that might not always be clear to us, but is always designed for our greater good. These signs, much like breadcrumbs left by the Creator, invite us to align ourselves with his will. They call us to grow in faith, change for the better, and step boldly into the destiny that God has prepared for us. As we reflect on these signs, let us remember that they are not mere coincidences or fleeting moments. They are invitations from God to draw closer to him. When we begin to see patterns in our lives, moments of divine repetition, we must take heart. This is not the randomness of life at work. This is God, in his loving sovereignty, guiding us with gentle hands, whispering truths into our hearts, and preparing us for the unexpected surprises he is waiting. He is with us, he is guiding our steps, and he is ready to surprise us in ways that stretch beyond what we can even imagine. As we explore these signs, let us consider one of the most poignant expressions of God's surprising love, the restoration of lost relationships. Few experiences in life can rival the pain of fractured relationships, broken trust, unhealed wounds, and the lingering sting of betrayal. Yet, it is precisely here that God's miraculous work is revealed. The restoration of lost relationships is not only a powerful reminder of his love, but also a clear indication of his divine intervention. With God, nothing is beyond repair. Our hearts, which might seem shattered beyond recognition, can be mended with the tender hands of our Creator. God works through reconciliation in the most unexpected ways, weaving healing where there was once division. Consider a bridge that was once strong, a pathway connecting two hearts, now left in ruin. The foundation may have cracked, and the structure may have decayed, but then, the hand of God begins to rebuild. Slowly, plank by plank, the bridge is restored, not to its former state, but to something even more resilient, more beautiful, and more enduring. This is what God does in our relationships. He does not simply restore them to what they were, but transforms them, renewing and strengthening the bonds that were once broken. We find a powerful example of this in the story of Joseph and his brothers, one of the most profound narratives of forgiveness and restoration in the Bible. After years of separation, betrayal, and heartache, Joseph was reunited with his brothers. What seemed like an impossible reconciliation became a testament to the miraculous ways in which God works. It wasn't just a coincidence that Joseph found himself in the position to forgive. It was God's divine orchestration. Through forgiveness, through grace, God healed broken hearts and brought restoration to what once seemed irreparable. This story echoes through the ages, reminding us that God's plan includes not only the healing of our hearts, but also the mending of the relationships that we hold most dear. When we witness the restoration of lost relationships in our own lives, it is a sign that God is actively working in us. How can we recognize this sign? It often begins with a subtle shift in our hearts, a softening, a stirring of compassion where there was once bitterness. Perhaps it's an unexpected urge to forgive, to reach out, or to remember the good times shared. It may come in the form of an invitation to reconnect, through a phone call, a letter, or even a chance encounter. And in that moment, we must choose to embrace it. This is God's invitation to us, an opportunity to open our hearts to His healing grace. Restoration does not mean forgetting the past. It means moving forward with grace and love, acknowledging that through God, all things are made new. As we open our hearts to His healing work, we must remember that no relationship is too broken for God to restore. Even the most fractured bonds can be mended through His love, and sometimes, the most beautiful surprises come through the people we thought we had lost forever. What is impossible for us is always possible for God. This restoration of relationships is not just a beautiful, personal experience, it is a reflection of the gospel itself. Christ's sacrifice on the cross was the ultimate act of restoration, reconciling humanity with God. In Christ, God demonstrated the depth of His love, forgiving us while we were still sinners, and offering us the chance to be reconciled to Him. In this light, the restoration of our earthly relationships is but a shadow of the greater reconciliation God has made possible through Jesus Christ. As we move forward in our lives, let us ask ourselves, are there relationships in our lives that God is calling us to restore? Are there bridges that need to be rebuilt, not through our own strength, but through His grace? Are we open to God's work of healing, trusting that He can bring good even from the most painful of circumstances? Let us look with anticipation for the surprises God has in store as we open our hearts to His transforming power. His surprises, often delivered through the restoration of relationships, remind us that we are never beyond the reach of His love and redemption. In the coming days, let us prepare to explore another sign, protection from harm. As we reflect on God's hand of guidance and healing, we will discover how His divine protection shields us from dangers seen and unseen, leading us on the path to His perfect will. But for now, let us stand in awe of the restoration that is possible through God's love, and let us open our hearts to the healing work He longs to complete in us. The story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stands as a powerful reminder of God's unwavering protection. In the face of an imposing and fearsome king, they were cast into a furnace, burning with the fury of man's wrath. Their refusal to bow to an idol was not just a rejection of worldly authority, but a declaration of their unwavering trust in the one true God. And what happened next? As they stood firm in their faith, God's divine presence shielded them, unscathed, untouched, and without even the faintest trace of smoke on their garments. This is not merely an ancient tale, it is a living testimony of God's protection and faithfulness in the midst of trials. We are all bound to face moments of challenge and opposition in our lives. How do we recognize God's hand in these difficult moments? It might not always appear as we expect. It could be in the sudden, unexplainable delays that keep us from a potential accident, in the inner prompting to take a different route, or even in the unspoken peace that rises within us during a storm. When we reflect on these instances, can we see the tender whisper of God's presence? I am here, protecting you, guiding you. How many times have we gone through life unaware of the quiet ways in which God has intervened to keep us safe? Have we taken a moment to pause, to recognize, and to thank Him for the protection that we often take for granted? Yet, let us not forget that God's protection is not just about physical safety. Yes, He watches over us, but His care reaches much deeper. His protection extends to our hearts, our spirits, and our futures. How often have we been guarded from spiritual harm, from temptations that might have derailed our walk with Him? In those moments, we must trust that He is not only keeping us safe from physical danger, but also from the spiritual dangers that lurk unseen in this world. It is His promise that He will guard our hearts with a love that never falters. Can we trust Him, even when we don't understand why certain things happen? Do we trust that, like those 3 men in the furnace, He will turn every fiery trial into a demonstration of His glory? But there is more. The protection God offers is not passive. It is a powerful, active force that shapes our journey of faith. It draws us closer to Him, deepens our reliance on His Word, and nurtures the growth of our trust. In the midst of hardship, we discover that the trials we face often serve as divine moments for our faith to increase, for our belief in God's promises to become stronger. Just as the seed planted in the soil grows in secret, unseen but certain in its purpose, so too does our faith in the hidden depths of our hearts. It may seem dormant, buried beneath the weight of trials and struggles, but God is at work, nurturing our trust, growing it into something beautiful and strong. This growth of faith, though sometimes quiet, is powerful and life-changing. Abraham, chosen by God to be the father of many nations, exemplifies the journey of increasing faith. He too faced a promise that seemed impossible. How could he, an old man, father a child? How could Sarah, barren for years, bear the son of promise? Yet, Abraham believed. His belief did not waver in the face of doubt, and through his steadfast trust, God fulfilled his promise. The birth of Isaac was not merely the fulfillment of a promise, it was the result of a faith that had grown, nurtured by God's unwavering presence and promises. How do we experience this growth in faith? It begins, often, in moments of struggle, moments where everything around us appears to crumble. When the weight of the world presses down, it is in these moments that our trust in God is refined. The trials we face are not designed to break us. They are God's way of cultivating within us a deeper trust in His sovereignty. Do we resist in these moments, or do we lean in closer to Him, knowing that He is working within us, strengthening us for what lies ahead? Our faith does not simply increase in moments of calm, it flourishes in the storms, when we choose to believe not in what we can see, but in what we know deep within our hearts. Faith grows not just when we see the path clearly, but when we trust God's hand even in the unseen. How many times have we doubted God's plan, only to look back and see His faithfulness in ways we never could have imagined? Can we believe that the trials we face today are not the end of the story, but are preparing us for something greater? Let us ask ourselves, what is God trying to teach me through the trials I am facing today? Can I see His protection in ways I hadn't recognized before? How's my faith growing, even in the darkest times? These questions, though uncomfortable, will lead us to a deeper understanding of God's presence in our lives. Just as He was with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, He is with us today, watching over us, preparing us, and guiding us into a future filled with His love and grace. As we reflect on His protection and the increasing faith He cultivates in us, let us prepare our hearts for the next sign He will give, one that will deepen our relationship with Him and open our eyes to the divine surprises He is waiting. Are we ready to step out in faith? Will we trust Him, not because we understand, but because we know He is good, and He is faithful? God is at work in our lives, even now, protecting us, growing our faith, and preparing us for the glorious future He has in store. Let us walk forward with trust, courage, and hearts full of gratitude for the God who watches over us, always. In trust, we are called to make decisions not based on the fleeting impressions of what we see, but on the firm conviction that God, in His infinite wisdom, is guiding us with His loving hand. Do we truly believe that God's promises are unshakable, no matter how turbulent the storm around us? When we begin to notice the deepening of our faith, we must embrace it, for it is God who is strengthening us, preparing us for what lies ahead. This growth in faith is not just a personal triumph, it is a divine signal, a sign that God is molding us for a purpose greater than we can even imagine. Are we prepared to receive the abundant blessings that He has stored up for us? As our faith increases, so does our readiness to partake in the eternal gifts of the kingdom of heaven. It is through the trials of life that we find God's hand moving within us, reshaping our hearts and minds, preparing us for divine blessings. The Apostle James, in his letter, speaks of this truth when he declares, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance." In the midst of hardship, God is not distant. He is refining us, working all things for our good, and preparing us for what lies ahead. Can we, like Christ, find joy even in the darkest moments? Christ, in His time on earth, exemplified this divine joy. In His suffering, He did not succumb to despair. Instead, He pressed on toward the ultimate goal, the redemption of humanity. He understood that every trial was an opportunity for growth, and so it is for us. We, too, can find joy amidst our suffering when we align ourselves with God's will, trusting that He is using our pain to create something beautiful. In the book of Hebrews, it is written that for the joy set before Him, Jesus endured the cross. What a profound truth this is. Christ knew that His suffering was not in vain. It was part of a greater plan, one that would bring salvation to the world. In the same way, we must shift our perspective on the trials we face. How often do we view hardship as a punishment, when in fact, it is often God's way of preparing us for something far greater? When we are in the midst of difficulty, we must ask ourselves, what is God teaching me through this trial? What strength is He building in me? What character is he refining in me? Trials are not the end of the story, but rather the prelude to the divine surprises that God has for us. We can look to the life of the Apostle Paul as an example of finding joy in the midst of trials. Paul, who was imprisoned and persecuted for his faith, writes to the Philippians, "Rejoice in the Lord always." I will say it again, rejoice. His joy did not come from his circumstances. It came from his relationship with Christ and his unwavering belief in God's sovereignty. In the same way, we can choose joy, even when the road is difficult. Our joy is not rooted in the temporary comforts of this world, but in the eternal truth that God is with us, guiding us, and refining us for his purpose. It is in these moments of trial that our faith is tested, but it is also in these moments that our faith has the potential to grow exponentially. As we face hardship, we are given the opportunity to lean into God's promises, to trust in his faithfulness, and to deepen our relationship with him. When we find joy in the midst of trials, it is a sign that we are not walking alone. God is with us, walking beside us every step of the way, even when we cannot see the path ahead. This joy is not a fleeting emotion, but a deep, unshakable peace that only God can provide. It is the same peace that Christ offered his disciples when he said, "Peace I leave with you. My peace I give you." This peace is not the absence of struggle, but the presence of God's comforting presence in the midst of our struggles. When we find joy in the midst of trials, we are experiencing the divine peace that transcends understanding. It is a sign that God is working in our lives, turning our mourning into dancing, our sorrow into joy, and our weakness into strength. Are we willing to embrace this joy, even in the darkest of times? Can we trust that God is working in us, even when we cannot see the outcome? As we reflect on the promises of God, let us remember that his surprises are often revealed in the most unexpected ways. The trials we face today are not the end of the story. They are the beginning of something greater, something beyond what we could ever imagine. As we continue our journey of faith, let us hold fast to the hope that God is always at work in our lives. Let us stay watchful, stay hopeful, and above all, stay rooted in faith. For in the midst of our trials, we can trust that God is preparing us for divine blessings and surprises that will exceed all expectations. And when we find joy in our trials, we know that we are on the path that leads to eternal life with Christ, where every tear will be wiped away and joy will reign forevermore. Thank you for joining us today at Heavenly Helps. It is no accident that you are here. God's presence is always near, ready to reveal his plans for your life in ways beyond comprehension. As you reflect on today's message, consider this. How has God's love and guidance touched your heart today? Just as Jesus walked with us on earth, he continues to walk beside you now. His surprises are not mere coincidences, but divine interventions designed to bring us closer to his will. Share this message with someone who needs a reminder that God's promises are never far. May you find peace in his presence, knowing that his timing is perfect. Let his love guide you, and always remember, his grace is sufficient.